Today, we're going to be talking about how to reinvent your life and how to get ahead of 99% of people, because life is way too short. We need to get shit done. And this video is going to help you embody the mindset and also real strategies to help you stay more consistent, more focused, and bring you to the goals that you want. Here are all the video chapters, and you can find the video chapters in the description below. And if you are someone who is ready to do the real work, I'm not just talking about watching these videos, but actually transforming. I provide worksheets for every single one of my videos. In these worksheets, you'll find in-depth journaling prompts as well as practical exercises to help you start removing your limiting beliefs and to write out an action plan so you can start living out as your highest self today. You can access these worksheets down in the description below. Now let's dive right into the video. Let's first talk about why your 20s is meant to be the worst decade of your life. Most people think that by maximizing your 20s, it's about going to festivals, going to parties, living it up, drinking until dawn, and experiencing a lot of these firework experiences. But being in your 20s is so much deeper than that. The most productive way to spend your 20s is to first unlearn the path that your parents or society has given you. The second thing is to relearn what you want and decide what is actually in alignment with my values, my purpose, and my talents. And then the third piece is to build the proper foundations so that you can create an easy life for yourself in the next few decades. So in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. Hard decisions that you make now lead to an easier life in the future. So I have a really great analogy for this. If you have an apple seed and you plant that apple seed in the soil, it takes 3 months for that seed to sprout into a little plant outside of the soil. But during those 3 months require a lot of intervention. You have to water it, but you can't water it too much. You have to make sure it has direct sunlight. You have to make sure that it has the proper nutrients in the soil. And any sort of parasite that comes by damages the plant and it could kill the plant. There are so many different dangers that can cause this little sprout to die. But after 3 months of hard labor, you see a little sprout in the ground, and that seems really marginal for how much work you're putting in. But if you were to do this for another 5 to 10 years, that little sprout is going to turn into a tree, and that tree is going to give you the first set of apples. You know, you can pluck out your very first apple after 5 to 10 years. Now, if we were to shift this to 8 to 15 years, that's when the tree starts to mature. An apple tree that is 30 years old will give you an abundance of fruit, an abundance of apples without you even needing to properly intervene to constantly water it, because at that point, it's pretty much self-sufficient. In this phase in your 20s, you are not meant to be harvesting right now. You are meant to be planting those seeds, trial and error, discovering what kind of business you want to do, discovering what kind of relationships you want, discovering yourself. No matter if you're building your careers, your finances, your confidence, your YouTube channel, your TikTok channel, your business, everything that happens is going to feel proportionately more difficult in the beginning because your roots are still relatively shallow. There's still a level of vulnerability, fragility. When you're building something fresh and new, it's going to require a lot of work in the process to move yourself forward because you're still building that muscle. You're still building those skill sets. You're still building that reputation, and that takes time. Now, it's not to say that it will take 5 to 10 or 15 years. Sometimes it may just take 3 years. If you commit yourself to a goal, to a promise to yourself, that could change your life. Imagine if you went all in on one goal for the next 3 years. If you didn't lose sight of it, you stayed consistent on track for 3 years. Imagine how much your life can change. So that's why your 20s are meant to be quite difficult. And if that is the case for you right now, you are actually on the right track. My next point that's going to get you ahead of 99% of people is to build an anti-vision. If you were to remain the same and take the same actions every single day, what is the worst possible reality that could happen in the next 10 years? So if you do not work out today, and if you do not work out for the next 10 years, what's the worst possible outcome that could happen? If you didn't execute on this business, right? You have to keep working the same job over and over again that you absolutely hate. That is also an anti-vision, because a lot of people struggle with consistency. And I used to be in that same scenario. My parents and my sisters, they always told me that growing up. But what changed? How was I able to go from someone who lacked so much consistency and was so irresponsible? And how did I transform into someone that stayed consistent, stayed on route, even if I didn't feel like it? Unfortunately, positivity is not enough to keep you consistent. In human psychology, we are designed and wired for survival. We are wired and designed to avoid pain, not to seek pleasure. So when our minds are only focused on the positive, on the pleasure, we do not feel this urgency to work. We don't feel this urgency to keep going. But if you were to connect with your anti-vision, that is tapping into your survival instincts, and that will create consistency. I was reading Emma Greed's book, Starting With Yourself, and she opened up about her anti-vision because she said that this anti-vision was one of the greatest drivers to her success. Her anti-vision was that she grew up in East London, and she grew up with a single mother, and her father left her quite early on, and all the women around her did not have any sort of financial stability, and they relied on their partners, their boyfriends, their husbands for that financial stability. And that meant that these women were constantly at the mercy of their male partners. So even if these men cheated on them, left them, disrespected them, abused them, these women had to be okay with it. So she saw that as a reality that she did not want to be one of those women ever in her life. And that drove her to work hard. She was able to start with those minimum wage jobs, and then she built her career working in fashion, and then she built her own agency, and then she's built multiple brands like Good American and the co-founder of Skims. She is now a multi-millionaire because of her anti-vision. Now, let's bring it back to you. What is your anti-vision? What is the worst case scenario if you didn't take action today, if you stopped executing on your goals? And I urge you to go into this practice like a mad scientist and find some way to make this worst case scenario as awful as possible. Keep in mind that the biggest risk that you can take right now is inaction and playing it safe. This next chapter, to get ahead of 99% of people, is to seek out goals or opportunities that make your current self feel underqualified. I went to a networking event and I spoke to not one, but multiple women that said that they didn't feel qualified for this entry-level position. And I was representing a company at the time, so I opened up the job posting with them and I looked at every single requirement and I said, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? They were like, yep. And then when it got to the degree, the bachelor's of whatever, so this person had a finance background, but the requirement said you need to have a finance background, accounting background, and or engineering background. And I said to her, is this the only thing that is stopping you from applying to this job? And she said, yeah, it's because I don't fully meet all the requirements, so I don't think that I'll get it. And I was like, girl, are you crazy? You fit every single requirement except for this and or sentence of finance, accounting, and or engineering. And there's no way one person could have all three of these bachelor degrees fresh out of college. Do not ever underestimate yourself just because you don't meet every single requirement. And you're not going to be able to make those quantum leaps because you're leaping within your reach. Apply to jobs where you feel underqualified, to start things even when you feel underqualified. Even if you're going for certain relationships or certain men, if certain men feel out of your league, it doesn't disqualify you immediately. What if you are exactly what he's looking for? So the rule of thumb is to stop seeking out opportunities that have a 95% success rate. But instead, I want you to start seeking out opportunities that have a 30% to a 50% success rate. Why? Because it's going to challenge you to bring out a very different version of you. You can no longer live in the same program of who you are now because it's going to require a different level of focus, a very different level of competency, capability, skill set, mindset in order to achieve the very goal that you're after. Being underqualified is actually a really great emotion because it's showing you where your untapped potential is. Something that is very reassuring you is knowing that no one is born qualified. Unless you are a lawyer and you need a JD to practice law, you actually don't need proper certifications to do big things. Example is Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely is the founder of Spanx now, but before that, she had no business degree. She's never started a clothing company. She doesn't have experience talking to manufacturers. She doesn't have experience with the clothing industry. She decided to take action despite feeling completely underqualified. And through that resilience, she was able to build a $1 billion brand through Spanx. So it does not matter whether you're qualified or not, especially in this day and age, because it just takes your own resilience and self-belief. A lot of people think that in order to achieve their goals, that they only need to take action. That's why a lot of people get into the space of burnout or constantly working but not moving the needle forward is because they're not aligning their identity and self-concept. Our subconscious mind runs 90% of our programs. That means that if our conscious mind is taking proactive action towards the goals that we want, but if our subconscious mind is not on board with that idea, we're going to keep self-sabotaging. We're going to keep ourselves exactly where we are. This is where the embodiment of great self-worth is so important, because that is going to carry you miles further than someone who was just working on the action piece. The important thing is that you need to have both, but working on the identity, the self-concept, is so crucial. Proof does not come first. It is your self-concept. Proof is only a reflection of your self-concept, because life is simply a mirror. Everything is just reflecting back to you, your self-concept, your level of self-worth. So if you want to maximize and increase the quality of your life, you need to increase your self-worth. So instead of making up the excuse that you're underqualified, instead, what if you started challenging that narrative and start saying to yourself, what if I am smart enough to figure this out? Everything is figure outable. There is nothing that is super complicated, that if you have the resilience to sit down and figure it out, you are going to figure it out one way or another. Nothing is actually that hard in life. You have to take the Elle Woods mentality from Legally Blonde and believe in yourself before anyone else believes in you. Because you do not need to have prior proof to show you that you can do it. What if that capability has already been within you? The very last chapter is to build identity capital. Steve Jobs is a wonderful representation of what building identity capital looks like. Steve Jobs did not just come from a technology background. And of course, as a little baby, he probably didn't have any sort of experience whatsoever, but he chose to follow his curiosity. He's learned a lot about Eastern philosophy, calligraphy, design, technology. And at the time, if an outsider were to look at all of the different subjects he was studying, they're going to be like, you're not going to be successful. There's no correlation to all of these different things. And years later, he was able to make Apple so successful because he was able to blend design with technology and his ability to use his storytelling ability to make Apple an unforgettable brand. So, let's talk about you. How are you building identity capital in your life right now? Are you truly taking the time to build your assets, building your skill sets, building up your experiences, building up your relationships and connections, building up memories, building up a reputation? Are you building up enough assets in your life that makes you more and more valuable? Follow where your curiosity takes you. If you're not interested in something and you try learning it, you're not going to be very engaged. But your curiosity leads you to where your strengths are. We may not necessarily see the immediate output and the immediate return, but over time, those different subjects that you learn is going to come together one day. You'll never see the way that things connect until the very end. One of the biggest problems in this day and age is analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis is being bombarded with endless information, endless ideas, endless opportunities. We feel paralyzed because there are way too many options and we don't know where to go. It's very similar to being plopped in the middle of a desert and being told to find your way home. There are millions of different journeys, millions of different paths in that desert where you don't know where to start. Building identity capital only requires you to take a general direction of where you think you want to go. That's all it takes. If you want simply to have a better financial foundation and you want to have a little more money every month, if that is simply the goal, then start taking a few more shifts. Start taking on new side hustles. Get that TaskRabbit account. Get that Fiverr account. Or if you want to make exponentially more money and you don't have any sort of skill or income base yet, then start learning a brand new skill and learn how to market that skill. There are endless opportunities, but that choice that you make is not endgame. And in fact, a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they start with one business and then the next business and then the next business. They're not going to know if that business is going to yield any success until they start collecting data. And you need to approach success in the same way. You need to approach it in a way where it's not personal if you fail, but every failure is just building on more identity capital. And I have a perfect example of this because I have my own museum of failures around entrepreneurship. So I've started dropshipping maybe 5 times, failed all of them. I did Amazon FBA and I lost quite a bit of money from that. And I also started a branding design business. And while that did work, I burnt myself out a lot. And now you are seeing probably one of many different businesses that I've started. So this YouTube channel has been an accumulation of all of those past failures because I've learned so many skills throughout the process. One being how to find winning video ideas. Another is how to market and sell myself, how to present my value, how to speak in front of a camera, how to do social media marketing. There were so many different aspects through those failures where I learned the important skills that I needed to succeed on YouTube. It's just an accumulation of my identity capital that gives me topics to talk about, that gives me real insights, that allows me to be able to bring value to you because I needed to build my own identity capital in order to bring value. So this is your sign to stop planning because you're never going to figure it out by having those ideas live in your head, but you need to put your boots to the ground and start executing because execution is the only way you're going to get real data. You need to reframe your museum of failures and start seeing it as adding dimension to your identity capital. When I say building identity capital, it is not just limited to building high income skills or constantly learning, but it's about building life experiences as well. It is important for everyone to have 5 big life experiences that they can talk about for the rest of their lives, whether it's at a dinner party, or if you're on a first date, or if you're telling your kids about these stories, it brings dimension to who you are as a being. When you're doing business with someone, and if you are someone who has never had any sort of life experiences outside of making money, you're gonna appear as someone that is super boring. And the more multidimensional you are, the more life experiences, meaningful life experiences that you've had, and the more stories that you can share, that makes you an incredibly attractive person. Identity capital is the value that you bring through lived experiences. And that ends up creating the richness of your personality, of your stories, of your genuine presence. So don't just limit yourself to what the business potential could be like, but also expand yourself to have more lived experiences. Now, we've reached the end of this video. If you want to implement everything that I've taught in this video, then check out my worksheets down below. And if you are on the journey of becoming the woman of your dreams and building a life that you love, check out my channel because I make a ton of videos about self-worth, love, money, relationships, career, literally all things high-value women energy. And if you love this video, I highly recommend that you check out this video over here. This video is about how to reinvent yourself and become completely unrecognizable in just 6 months. I love and appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!